In just a few months, the case of the poor Clares of Belorado has become one of the most symbolic conflicts currently affecting the Catholic Church. It is not simply a disciplinary dispute between a religious community and its bishop. Something much more profound is at stake: the relationship between tradition, authority, and the contemporary ecclesial crisis. And the events of the night of March 12th have given this story a provisional epilogue that deserves to be reconstructed with precision. At 2:46 in the morning, in the monastery of Santa Clara de Belorado in Spain, 7 nuns left the building that for centuries had housed a community of poor Clares. It wasn't an impromptu escape, but a calculated exit. A few hours later, the civil justice order for eviction was due to take effect. Before leaving the monastery, the former abbess performed a gesture that many interpreted as symbolic. The last candle on the altar was extinguished, the lights were turned off, and the nuns left the convent into the silence of the night. Shortly thereafter, the lawyers handed over the keys to the Guardia Civil, while a representative of the Federation of Poor Clares was tasked with formally retaking possession of the monastery. This is the latest chapter in a story that began in 2024 and has since generated a media storm throughout Spain and the international Catholic world. The Santa Clara Monastery is no ordinary place. It is a foundation dating back to the 14th century, located along the Camino de Santiago, a place of prayer that has spanned centuries of ecclesiastical history. Seeing it suddenly transformed into the scene of an ecclesiastical and judicial clash inevitably attracted attention. The turning point came in 2024. That year, a group of nuns from the monastery published a highly controversial document. The text, released publicly, contains a radical critique of the contemporary Church. It claims that the Church that emerged after the Second Vatican Council introduced serious doctrinal errors. On this basis, the nuns declare that they do not recognize the authority of contemporary pontiffs. This is an extremely serious accusation because, from the perspective of canon law, it amounts to a de facto breach of communion with the Church. In the document, the nuns also announce that they are placing themselves under the authority of a bishop associated with sedevacantist circles, that is, groups that maintain that the See of Peter is de facto vacant due to alleged errors of recent pontiffs. This choice provoked an immediate reaction from the Archdiocese of Burgos, on which the monastery depends. The Archbishop declares that the position of the nuns constitutes a schism. From a canonical perspective, schism occurs when someone refuses communion with the Roman pontiff or with the Church united to him. The nuns were then excommunicated and expelled from consecrated life. From that moment on, according to ecclesiastical authorities, they were no longer a religious community recognized by the Catholic Church. At this point, the second level of conflict emerges, the legal one. Who owns the monastery? The nuns maintain that the monastery belongs to their community and therefore cannot be expelled. The Archdiocese, however, maintains that the building belongs to the Church and that a community that breaks ecclesial communion cannot continue to occupy a Catholic monastery. The case ends up before the Spanish civil courts, and here comes a decision that completely changes the course of events. The courts ruled that the monastery must return to the control of the Archdiocese. In other words, the nuns had no legal right to remain in the building. From that moment on, a long legal battle began, involving appeals, public statements, and growing tensions. The story was often covered by the media in sensational tones. Some newspapers spoke of rebel nuns. Others described the event as a sort of traditionalist revolt. But this portrayal is often inaccurate and simplified. The key point to understand is that the issue is not simply about defending Catholic tradition. Many traditionalist circles have distanced themselves from the Belorado nuns. The reason is simple. Defending tradition doesn't necessarily mean embracing sedevacantism. Catholic tradition has always taught that communion with the Roman Pontiff is an essential element of the Church. In this sense, the Belorado case becomes an affair that divides even the traditionalist world. On the one hand, there are those who see the nuns as a gesture of resistance to the perceived doctrinal crisis in the contemporary Church. On the other, there are those who believe the decision to break communion with the Pope represents a step away from Catholic tradition. Meanwhile, important changes were taking place within the community. At the beginning of the crisis, the monastery numbered 16 nuns. As the months passed, some reconciled with the Church and left the group. Others chose not to continue the dialogue. In the end, a small group of religious sects remained, continuing to uphold their initial position. And it's this group that's facing an eviction order. The court-set date is approaching. The possibility of the police publicly intervening to evict a monastery is becoming a reality. To avoid a scene that would have had a strong media impact, the decision was made to leave the convent spontaneously. Thus, we arrive at the night of March 12th. At 2:46 in the morning, the nuns leave the monastery. There are no public protests, no clashes. Only the symbolic gesture of the last candle being extinguished on the altar and the keys being handed over to the authorities. From that moment on, the monastery formally returned to the control of the Church. The nuns, however, now found themselves in a completely new situation. They no longer belong to the canonical structure of Catholic religious life and must decide where to settle and what form to give to their community. But a broader question remains. Is the Belorado case just an isolated incident, or is it a sign of deeper tensions within the contemporary Church? In recent years, the debate between tradition and reform has intensified. The night the poor Clares left Belorado does not definitively close this story. Rather, it marks the beginning of a new era. The monastery continues to exist. The Church has regained control. But the debate this story has sparked is far from over. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment, Amen. God bless you.